Oh, give me a goddamn break. So I just watched the third episode of She-Hulk, and to nobody's surprise, it wasn't good. The MCU has been dropping a lot of content as of late, and I have some strong opinions about all of it. So I'm going to start by talking about the latest piece of MCU sludge, She-Hulk Attorney at Law. Now, I'm going to be completely honest here. When I watched the first trailer, I didn't think it was going to be terrible. Yes, the CGI looked horrible, and most of my interest came from the announced return of Tim Roth's Abomination, but I still thought it could be a decent show. I even defended it a little when my friends said that they thought it looked like hot garbage. Man, with the MCU's recent reputation, I really should have known better. The show's early reviews were then released, and I was seeing an overwhelmingly amount of negative reviews. The initial IMDb score was, and still is, the lowest rated MCU project of all time. That title originally belonging to Eternals and then being taken over by Miss Marvel. It seems like that's an occurring issue for Marvel's Phase 4, doesn't it?
No, 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 no.
But that's another topic for another time. But of course, there were somehow a decent amount of positive reviews, so I thought maybe the show's humor and comedy aspect wasn't going to be for everyone, so I decided to give the show a chance and watch the first episode. The episode started off normal enough with a very fast-paced origin for Jennifer Walters, aka the She-Hulk. Now, I'm not going to be breaking down every single episode. Instead, I'll just talk about key moments from the episodes that triggered my need to talk about it. So I'll just give you the simple version of what happened. But long story short, Bruce and Jen get into a car accident. Bruce is knocked unconscious. Jen must help Bruce from the car. She gets some of his blood onto her open wound, and she turns into a Hulk. She then makes her way to a bar to clean herself up, and she's immediately greeted by a group of ladies, and they start assuming that the reason Jen is all battered up is because of mistreatment from a significant other. Now, while I don't think that this scene is necessary for the story, it didn't really bother me either. She then goes outside and is greeted by a group of drunken fellows who immediately start a conversation with her. They don't initially do anything wrong, instead they just annoy her, but this triggers Jen to turn into the She-Hulk, but she is immediately stopped by the Hulk. Once again, this scene didn't really bother me, but it started to give me a sense of what this show is going to turn out to be. What really did eventually grind my gears, however, comes much later on in the episode. After Bruce is nearly finished showing Jen the ropes on how to be a Hulk, Jen believes that she's ready to leave and get back to her normal life. Bruce is reluctant to let her leave because he feels that she still needs to learn about controlling her anger. Jen then says that she controls her anger, and I quote, infinitely more than Bruce. She backs up her points by arguing that she gets harassed on the street and talked down to by men in her workplace, and if she reacts, she will be called emotional or difficult. Now, yes, I understand. This stuff does happen, but this is a superhero show. Do we really need to go there in a fictional world about enhanced individuals with superpowers? People watch this stuff to escape from the real world, turn their brain off, and enjoy some good old-fashioned action from our favorite comic book characters. They don't want to lecture on how to be better in the real world. Not to even mention, this argument probably isn't even valid taking into account the way that she's using it. Talking down to someone who's been a Hulk for 15 years probably isn't the best way to get your point across. Bruce was constantly on the run from the government. He was constantly worrying about the people around him because if he lost control, they may get hurt or even worse. He even attempted suicide once. So this scene just made me roll my eyes and lose hope for the rest of the show, because how can you even say that she controls her anger better than Bruce when he has been a victim of anger issues and trauma for his entire life? Following this scene, not to mention, Jen and Bruce get into a bit of a quarrel, and the Hulk is made to look like an absolute softie. Now, I'm not going to get too much into how the MCU ruined the Hulk, because that topic has been discussed many times by many people by now, but there's a scene where Hulk literally gets ran over by a Jeep. This is the same Hulk that used two cars as boxing gloves as a weapon against the Abomination. So this show just further proves that the MCU couldn't give two damns about the Hulk. Oh, but that's not all. This show is a comedy, so that means it's funny, right? Wrong. I had the blankest of faces while watching this episode, and every other episode for that matter. So let me address the elephant in the room really quick. An aspect of this show that makes it pop out from any other MCU project is that Jennifer Walters breaks the fourth wall at least once per episode. Now, this is a complete personal preference, I get that, but I don't typically like the breaking of the fourth wall humor unless it's Deadpool. It also seems like they dumb down every character in this show so that they fit into what this show is trying to be tonally, which I will explain a little later on in this video. But of course, just like any other piece of Marvel content, I continued watching, and the lecturing and subtle hints of man-hating don't stop there. In episode 2, Jen gets fired from her job and she ends up looking for a new one. The first job she applies to rejects her and calls her a distraction. Now take that as you will. But I look at it as if she was rejected solely for being a woman and she may be a so-called distraction for the men in the courtroom. Now, I've brought this up to many other people, and they suggested that it may be because she's She-Hulk now. And while that's a complete possibility, I will, however, stick to my initial theory because of this show's reputation already. Now, on to the introduction of Emil Blonsky, aka the Abomination. This dude feels like a completely different character from when we last saw him in The Incredible Hulk. He shifted from a threatening villain to a hippie who's played for laughs. Then, in an effort to make the audience feel bad for him, they make him say that he was just under orders to stop a threat and that he thought he was the good guy. He then mentions that the government forced him the super soldier serum, but if I remember correctly, he actually volunteered for it, along with forcing Stearns to give him some of Banner's blood. Now, I don't know if this is all a ruse to deceive everyone, but as it stands, it makes no sense. Moving on to episode 3, Abomination continues to be played as a joke. There's a scene where he's explaining that he has 7 soulmates, and then there's another scene where he turns into the Abomination and he bumps his head up on the cell and he's telling everyone to calm down, and it just feels so goofy, and it's like they're trying to force this character into the tone of the show. And speaking of forcing characters to fit into the tone of the show, Wong returns once again to Phase 4 and he's playing into the comedic aspect of the show, and as a result he feels so goofy. They have him making jokes about erasing people's mind, much like in No Way Home. He's shown to be on a LinkedIn type of app where he's shown to have worked at Target, and he said he needed to break Abomination out of prison in order to win a fight against him to prove himself worthy of being the Sorcerer Supreme. All of that just makes him feel so out of character from what we've seen him in before, and I just don't know why the MCU is doing this. Speaking of not understanding the MCU, this episode ends with a post-credit scene that I'm sure everyone is already aware of. The infamous twerk scene with She-Hulk and Megan Thee Stallion. What's the point? What is honestly the point of this scene? What did they accomplish here? It's just over the top and worse than silly. But anyway, I don't really want to talk about this too much. For one, because I don't feel like it. For two, many people have already discussed it and it'd be redundant. Finally, there's a clear reference to the quote-unquote toxic fandom that has taken over Marvel content. There's a whole montage of social media reactions to She-Hulk with there literally being a few sentences on the screen reading, "Why are you turning every superhero into a girl?" and "No more female superheroes, please." Okay, if this is them trying to respond to the real world, it doesn't make any sense because no one is saying this at all. No one is complaining about already existing female superheroes getting their own content. And if people are, I want to see. I want to see proof because I have seen absolutely nowhere. I have never seen anyone complain about this. What people are actually complaining about is the gender swapping, race swapping, and the overall quality of content declining in order to drop as much content as possible and to please a certain audience. Not because there's a simple rise in female superhero content. I am all for females getting their long-awaited time in the spotlight, but not if it's going to be as passive-aggressive about men and toxic fandoms like this show has been so far. But anyway, that is enough of me rambling on about something that I dislike for this video. Now I know my title says that the MCU is dead, but that's not what I honestly believe. I do believe that the MCU can get back up on their own 2 feet if they start playing their cards right. If they take a breath and stop dropping so much content in such a small amount of time, they can actually bounce back and become the heavyweight studio that they once were. But that is a topic for another day. So drop a like if you enjoyed or agreed with what I had to say. Drop a dislike, of course, if you disagreed, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this from yours truly. So that's about all I have to say. Later.